I'm Carrie Watts. I am host of the Saved and Strong podcast, but I'm also an author, a speaker, not just a podcast host. But I love to help writers get their journals and prayers and notes into a book. I have a free resource called Start Writing Workbook. It'll be in the show notes, the link, as well as my email address, carrie@carriewatts.com. Let me know if you would like an appointment. I would love to hear your story. Let's just get on the phone and talk or on Zoom for 30 minutes. And let's get a strategy. Let's get a plan because your story matters. Enjoy the podcast. I'm here today with Trey Carroll, nexttestadvantage.com.
Hey, Carrie. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Tell us more about what you do and how it can help our students.
Well, Carrie, I, for 6 years, have been working with high school and college students. And what I've learned working with over 1,000 students is there's a lot of anxiety over the future, primarily with what do I do with my life? What's my career going to be? What am I good at? And so that's my job. I work with students and obviously parents, and I help ease that anxiety. I use an assessment to help them figure out how they're wired and how that pertains to work. And then I help them know, okay, I'm wired this way. What do I do next? How do I apply that into the real world? And that has been my job for the last 6 years.
How did you find your niche in your career?
Great question. Carrie, I had a stroke when I was 28, and that's how I ended up doing this work. And so while I was trying to recover, I had just previously worked with a career coach to help me understand me better and how that pertains to work and how God has wired me professionally. And I brought my results back out as I was recovering, and it dawned on me, I wish I had this information when I was 18. That would have really changed how I used college and, my early 20s, professionally speaking. And that's when the idea kind of popped in my head. Well, I wonder what 18-year-olds are doing now. I wonder how they're figuring out their calling. And one thing led to another, and that was 6 years ago. So that's how I found my niche. It was something very unexpected.
Taking this assessment and counseling with Trey will help widen their vision of the opportunities that are available. What would you add to that?
Students, they don't want to choose the wrong thing. And they think that, at 18 years old, 20 years old, if they don't choose right, well, then they've messed up their future. And so I combat a lot of that, and I help them see, hey, this is the way God has wired you. And we can do so many different things, jobs, careers, based on your interest and skills or, personality.
Give us your top reasons why they need Next Test Advantage.
The number one reason why they need me is they need to hear somebody other than their mother or father show them you're talented. Show them, hey, your interest in fill in the blank is not by accident. That actually ties into a career. Parents, y'all are telling them the right stuff and giving them really good direction. For some reason, they listen to me and they think I'm a guru. Number two is there is a system, there is a way to narrow down all of the things out there. It's been helping take what seems like chaos out there and make it a step-by-step system to find work that's exciting, to find opportunities that are exciting. That would be number two, is trying to bring some order to the chaos. The number three reason is I know college catalogs better than I know English. And so the second I see somebody wired for something, I immediately know how to attach that to a specific major, to specific classes. I've gotten too good at knowing how to boil things down into a major. Number four is a little intentionality up front as they're getting ready to go to college can save a whole lot of money. Because when you change your major, it's liable to cost more money. And so that would be four. A little bit can go a long way in saving actual dollar bills.
There you have it, listeners. Go to nexttestadvantage.com and let Trey start helping your student find their major today.
Do you like testimonies of overcoming? Saved and Strong shares stories of people who have overcome struggles to find strength. Each episode inspires resilience, hope, and faith, reminding listeners they're not alone.
Hi, this is Carrie Watts with the Saved and Strong podcast. I'm here with my friend and author, Charlsie Estess. Charlsie, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Carrie, it is so great to see you, and I am so thankful for the opportunity to chat with you.
Charlsie, tell us about your book and your author life.
So I never expected to be an author, Carrie. It's been such a labor of love and spiritual, roller coaster, I guess you could say. But it's been such a blessing. Honestly, it's been the biggest blessing of my adult life. So my background is actually in international finance and corporate strategy, and I did that for about 17 years. I went through some things when I was a young mom, and I started writing. And I did it as a hobby, but I fell in love with the process. And God knew what He was doing all along. I wrote a book. I actually wrote a couple of books. And it was really just a way I thought God was using the writing process to take me deeper. And that was my prayer, that He would take me deeper still, and that what I write would bear fruit in some way, whether it was just refining me or whether it was for someone else long term. But really, I just started writing in that way. And I was working a full-time job as I was writing. And so I never really had time to do anything with it. But there came a time where I pulled back from work so I could be a stay-at-home mom and be a little more available for my family. And during that time, I picked up what I had been writing over time. And I marketed it I took it to a writing conference, and lo and behold, one of my books sold. I've picked up an agent since then, so I've just continued to write, in faith.
Well, and I hear what you're saying because I never expected to be an author either. And it was just through my quiet time morning pages and prayer journals that I sort of felt the nudge of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go further in this writing journey. And that's when I joined a writing group online and then decided to write a book. But so how did you pick your niche? Share with our listeners your first book. What is it about? And I'm always curious to know, out of all the books we could write, why did you choose that one niche or book?
So this is what the first book published looks like. It's actually the second book that I wrote. The first book that I wrote, I wasn't sure what I wanted my niche to be, but I just wrote really in obedience to the Lord's nudging, like you said. I had some certain theme on my heart, and I very much what they call a discovery writer. I took that theme and I walked with Him. Where would it go? I am writing Christian romance. And why romance? For a couple of reasons. One, the Bible is the greatest love story. And so I feel like that's something that I can write. And I think that's a story that we all need to hear in some shape or fashion, right? So that's why romance. But this particular book, when I first wrote it, I love to read, and I read a lot of genres. But there were so many times where I would pick up a book and I would get started and I would be invested in the story. It was so good, so compelling, had a great storyline. I loved what the characters were doing, but it would hit a point probably around halfway through, and it was not edifying. And I wanted to know where the story went, but I kept being called, put these books down. This is not worthy of my time and edifying of my faith. And so I wanted to write a romance, and my initial target market was really what they call new adults, 18 to 30-year-old women. My audience has been much broader than that, which is a great thing. I'm glad that women of all ages love this book, but I was really trying to target that group with a compelling love story, but something that would also was low spice, was sweet, but had some real issues, and would maybe give them a nugget of truth and point them back and edify their faith.
Yeah, beautiful. So true, so true. I feel like sometimes when I watch movies or read books where there's like graphic scenes that I just have,
Right.
like you say, I just have to turn a blind eye. Like I want to know the story, but I don't need the details. As my
Yes.
dad used to
Right.
say, the gory details. And, no, I love that because there's a scene in my book where there's a girl who's being sexually abused, but there's nothing graphic. You just know what's going on. And
Right.
so, it kinda leaves the reader to their own imagination, if you will. And then okay, that's why the wise guy told her what he told her before it happened and after it happened, her whole healing journey. And that's what it's about, is we want people to seek Christ in the healing or in the journey. So I love that. Tell us the title of your book again and show it to us.
It's called When the Ocean Roars. It is Christian romance.
Yep. Well, I went to a writing conference in February, and one of our speakers is a Christian romance writer, but she doesn't say she's Christian romance. She just says, "I'm a slow burn romance novelist." But, uh, but she said the same thing, like, you gotta have a happily ever after. You gotta have that HEA, and all I could think about when she was saying that was the Bible has the best happily ever after, and God's
Amen.
love is gonna come back for us one day, and He loves us every day throughout. So and she tends to apologize. Now, I know some of you don't like romance, and it's not that we don't write romance. Just because we don't write romance doesn't mean we don't like romance. Everybody loves romance, right?
Right.
Everybody
Right.
loves a good love story. So, yeah, no, I love that you wrote about love and romance and just pure love. Like, we need more pure love. The world needs more pure love for sure.
Well, and not to give a spoiler on this one, so with my past work experience, I spent a lot of time working overseas. And so most of my books will take you on a journey. I was blessed to be able to travel a lot with my job when I was working. And, I think it's fun not to escape reality, but sometimes we just want something that takes us on a journey. And so this one actually takes place overseas. It's about an American who's overseas. And it's two points of view, male and female, but the man really battles the flesh. And so, I think that's something in young love, especially, that's really true, touches on that topic.
Yeah. We lived overseas. I don't know if you knew that. Yeah.
Did not.
Yeah, my husband was, in the Air Force, so we lived in Germany for 3 years, 2000 to 2003. My oldest son was born in Germany. So, I love Europe. I love overseas. We've taken our children once, but we hope to go back. Yeah.
I did not know that. Well, and I have a German in this book, so it's a pretty international cast.
Okay, that's a great teaser. I love it. Well, I have to admit I haven't read it yet. Now I have to read it.
Now you have to read it.
Now I have to read it. Well, this podcast is called Saved and Strong because I love to hear my guest faith journey. Tell us, you're obviously a mighty woman for the Lord. Tell us where that began.
Well, I don't know if I would say that, but I would say, where did it begin? Like so many people, I grew up in church. I would call myself a stubborn believer. I'm extremely analytical. And how that played out for me is I went to church and I knew the stories, but I really struggled making a leap of faith. And so I went for years. The Bible certainly tells us so very much, especially when we study it. But the more you study it, there's a lot of mystery in the Bible. And I really struggled to make a leap of faith because I didn't have all the answers. And at some point, as believers, we really have to have that blind faith and get to that point. So, towards the end of high school, I happened to visit a different church with a family friend, and very compelling message that Sunday. And there was an altar call. And at the end, I found the courage to walk down front and make a profession of faith. Now, the truth is between my profession of faith and really the next few years, I really lacked discipleship. I didn't have someone strong encouraging my walk. There's so many resources these days, devotionals, online studies. We have easy access to Christian music. So many things that if we choose those things, they can surround us and encourage our faith and help us grow our faith. I didn't have that at that time. And so I was a believer, but for several years, I was very much slow growing or stagnant. Toward the end of college, I met my husband, and we were very consistent in going to church together while we were dating, he was such an encourager in my life, which is really sweet. And I ended up rededicating my life. And, my walk has ebbed and flowed. I think everybody, in truth, their walk ebbs and flows, but the trajectory needs to be steady, right? And steadily up. And so I feel like that's where I've been. It took a little while. I had a slow start, but I'm trying to do all the things to continue to grow my faith. So
Yeah. Okay,
That's where
tell
it
us.
started.
Yeah. Well, tell us more about all the things. I mean, you know, in the day of a life of Charlsie, how does your faith journey play out?
So my faith journey plays out, I guess, a couple of ways. I wake up early. If you follow me on social media, you will see I take time to go out and watch the sun come up every morning. It is, I think, one of the greatest blessings and reminders of God's majesty and splendor. And so I watch the sun come up and I listen to the birds sing. And I know that sounds pretty cheesy, but it's the truth. I am a bird watcher and
That's my love language. You're speaking my language. Yeah.
I am a sky watcher is the truth. And in lots of ways. I love to be outside and um so I start that way. And whether it's one verse or a full daily reading, my eyes aren't so good these days, Carrie. My vision isn't great. And so I do have my regular Bible, but I have an app on my phone that I love and I use its daily reading. I miss some days, but I try very hard to do that daily reading and be grounded. Have a cup of coffee and be grounded. You know, his kingdom is my end game. And so there's just so much peace starting my day in his word, grounded in his word, and starting on that footing.
Yes. And I can tell the days that I do have a good quiet time and I do watch
Yeah.
the sunrise. I'm telling you, same. If you looked at the videos and pictures on my phone, it's all the birds, it's all the sunrises, it's all the everything. I could write about that all day, every day, but it would get redundant, right? But yes, and I am the same way. There's something very spiritual about putting my feet in the grass, watching the sunrise, and just getting connected to not creation, but the creator. And I know that my life would not exist without him,
Yeah.
and so I have to have that in the morning. And I feel like I am more creative after I tap into his creation. So yes, I love that. And it's worth getting up early to experience.
It is. I agree. I actually have found, especially with writing, I think I mentioned earlier, I consider myself a discovery writer and I take a lot of walks. So I may write something and then I'll go and I'll walk and pray over it, and meditate on what what I'm learning through scripture, through studies, maybe through a song. I watch for themes, patterns to repeat. And I feel like that's always a good compass. I feel like God drops those things if we're willing to watch for them. And, those are little landmarks almost in our life that we can use to navigate life and His will.
How does your writing day look?
It varies to some degree. I do write sometimes in the morning. If I have a few thoughts, I wake up in the night sometimes and I make a note. And if I've made a note, I'll usually try to start early. I am an early bird, so I always thought that my most fruitful time was in the morning. Over time, I've learned that's actually not the case. My best writing happens in the afternoon. And so I know that the podcast is called Saved and Strong. And in light of that, I think I actually get up, do the coffee, I do the study, I get my kids out the door, then I go work out. I want to be strong, not just scripturally, but I spend some time making sure that the temple he gave me is taken care of. And I miss, just like you said, if you miss your quiet time, if you miss your workout, all those things make a difference in how you feel during the day and just your energy level and that sort of thing. So I get in a workout and then that's when I sit down and I'll usually start, but my most creative time comes in the afternoon. And as far as creativity, my background is in finance. I really never expected or considered myself a creative type. But a lot of it is I have an idea when I've started a book. I have two books that are out on proposal right now with a big publishing house. So I'm in a waiting season on those. But uh, a lot of it is I have one idea, I study it. I listened to old sermons about that particular topic, those sorts of things. And I build a story around it. Could be a question. What does it look like what does it really look like to lay down your life to save someone else? We know that's a Bible story, right?
Hmm.
But what does that look like in a romance genre? And who are the players? And I build a world around a question. And so a lot of it's just sitting in my seat and thinking through those things. And I usually have a very basic mental guideline, a few points that I work towards, and then I just go, what's natural? What happens next to make this story play out?
Yeah. I love that because as our listeners are listening, if they're thinking about becoming an author, they want to know, how does an author, like you say, build a story? And so, every good hero's tale has a problem and has a solution.
Right.
And you've gotta have a story arc, and you've gotta have a good hook. You've gotta have all the elements of a good fiction story to keep your reader engaged so that they can get to the happily ever after. And so I love to hear you say how you build a story because it's different for all of us.
Right.
When you were first thinking about becoming an author and you were getting these ideas, where did you start? Did you get books on how to write, or did you listen to podcasts, or did you have a mentor?
Do you care if I backtrack just a little bit?
I don't mind a bit. I love to hear people's author stories.
So I never planned to be a writer. The way this all started, I was a young mom. I was working full time, was in the process. I had a 1-year-old at that time. I had gone back and I had started my MBA. So, as a mom, you can imagine I went to work from 8 to 5. A few nights a week, I went to school to get my MBA. My husband was helping with the baby. I worked with some amazing folks at the time, but I had a really demanding boss and I was tired. I was really I was very overcaffeinated, and I was just struggling, but I was committed to uh, playing out and reaching, you know, a goal I had set a long time ago. I think people, if anybody's like me, I think we all have a pretty picture that's in our head, right? When we're little girls and we're playing dress up, or we're playing pretend, we all have an idea of how our lives will play out. And as we go through high school, we solidify that with whether it's a major or we know we're going to go on and work, whatever it may be. We have that picture in our mind, but then reality bumps up against that at some point. And for me, at that point in time, too much caffeine, very tired with a child, I really started having anxiety. I started having panic attacks, trying to keep all the balls in the air and do life well. And that was when I really started. I'd always been a runner, but I loved being outside, as we mentioned. But it was a dark time, but I was growing a lot spiritually, right? So God takes us through these trials to teach us things. And I did a lot of self-examination. A few things came out of that season of life for me. One, my identity was, even though I was a believer, my identity was not in Him. It was very much tied still to ambition and career success. And that just wasn't working anymore. I wasn't resting my identity in Him. It was a hard time because I needed to learn where my identity truly was and not just say it, but live it out. That was also the time where I started feeling, God was redirecting me. I kept feeling what I would later realize was a calling, but I was very much like Jonah. I say this, instead of Nineveh, it was writing. And I truly kept hearing, feeling you need to write. And I thought, well, maybe it's the power of suggestion. There's this great woman that's in my Bible study and she journals and she's always talking about journaling, which is a fabulous tool, but it was not what God called me to do. I was like, maybe I'm just, maybe that's why I'm thinking about writing all the time. It was, Charlsie, go to Nineveh. And I'd say, nope, not me. Another week would pass. Charlsie, you need to go to Nineveh. Nope. I kept saying no, always feeling that I was supposed to be writing. and it made zero sense to me. I had never wanted to be a writer. I did have the most amazing English teacher in the 8th grade, which has helped me tremendously, and I give her kudos because she really taught me English. I just never knew how it would play out. But eventually I realized God's trying to tell you to write. And so by that point, I actually had finished my MBA. I was about to finish my MBA. And the school where I got it offered enrichment classes. And lo and behold, there was a writing enrichment class. And so I thought, well, I know nothing about writing creatively, but I love to learn. So I'll go take this writing, a creative writing class. And so I did. And that's where I started. And it wasn't very good. And uh, it went from there. Like you, I continue to take some classes. There are a lot of people that read craft books on how to write, and I have some of those, and I have read some of those. But I read more. I was reading a lot, trying to pay attention to what I was reading, who did things well, and then, bumping it up against what I saw in the craft books. But I joined several writing groups and continue to write. Where I learned probably the most, Carrie, was I was almost done with the second book, and I was still having that question because when I first started writing, I had no intention of selling a book. I really just thought it was God's way of teaching me something. It was kind of therapy. I loved the process, and I learned that I loved the process, but I didn't know what the plan was. But I was trying to be obedient. So I started entering my books in writing competitions just to see because the judges provide feedback, constructive feedback. What's good? What's bad? Did they like it? The 2 books that I started entering, both were doing pretty well. And I thought, well, maybe there's something else to this. And so that continued. I guess I shifted the prayer to some degree, praying to God, what do you want for this? Is it meant to be something for someone besides me? I worked really hard to hone that second story and make it specific to an age group where it would be, not just something that I had learned from, but something that would be edifying for others. And that's kind of how I got started.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and I love your testimony because you're a faithful witness of how God calls us and how we in our flesh doubt that calling. And then how do we know it's for real? Like you said, 2 things that I want to reiterate are you said you're in a season of waiting right now. And so there are still the peaks and valleys, even when you're in your calling. I think we learn the more we take those quiet times and read God's holy word and pray, the more we can decipher his voice versus somebody else's. Even if it is someone in our small group who's saying something and we're like, hey, am I thinking that because of this? Or is this really God? Here, I hear that your same story is a lot like mine. I woke up very early one morning and I felt that call to write. And so, I mean, I made a book deal with God, is what I say. I said, okay, Lord, I'm going to write it, but it's just between me and you. I just hope that I never yes, yeah, because I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have a degree in writing. I didn't have a creative writing background at all. I mean, yes, I loved, writing in school and writing letters. I was raised before computers and phones. So we had to write handwritten notes or the typewriter, if we wanted to send somebody a letter or what have you. But from writing my own memoir between my book deal with God and I realized that young girl that I wrote about was who I wanted to write to. And I knew that
Love that.
yeah, and that young girl is not walking around with a 50-year-old's memoir, right? She's walking around with fiction. So then I was like stretched even more. Okay, Lord, I'm not a writer, and now you're asking me to write fiction. So God will ask us to do hard things, and all He wants us is to say, sure, okay, blind faith, just follow me. And I have used that same analogy of Jonah. Like, I didn't want to end up in the belly of a whale. I didn't want to tell God no, and the beauty of writing is you're going to get critiques. People are going to write you a Amazon review. They're going to write you a Goodreads review, and their response is important. it can be wind beneath your wings, but it's not the end all do all be all review. Like our review, we haven't gotten our review yet. Our review is going to be when we step over into the next life from this one, right? Into heaven.
Amen.
But I want
That's
to
right.
hear, well done, good and faithful servant, right? And so,
That's right.
yeah,
Right. Well, and I love that. I love that you have a deal with God. I mean, we are very much the same. We haven't talked about this before now, so it's kind of interesting because I didn't tell anybody my husband knew I was taking some classes, but I actually didn't tell anybody because I was embarrassed because I didn't think I was any good at it.
yeah.
And it's interesting to see how it's played out and how much I've loved something I never expected. It has been such a blessing. If I went back to work in the business world, I would certainly make more money and I would be around more people. One of the challenges of writing, to be honest, is loneliness. There's a lot of quiet time. And so I worked really hard to surround myself with other women who are encouraging. And God has brought so many precious ladies and gentlemen who are similar. They're writers. It is such an interesting community and a kind community that encourages one another and cares about what's going on in each other's lives. So I've loved that. I'm part of a critique group with ladies from all over the country, and we help each other improve stories. And we're all believers and pray for each other and all those things. So it's even just the group has been very special.
Yes. And I too have found community with authors all over the nation. It is, I do feel like the Lord is at work all over, not just in our little state of Mississippi or even our little area, but all over the nation. And that gives me hope that the enemy wants us to think we're alone. He wants us to isolate, but we find so much joy and fellowship, especially as women, I think. I mean, men too, but I feel like as women, we really need that girl time. That's amazing. So what advice would you give to our listener if she is in that stage of feeling the calling to write and she just doesn't know her next stage, or even if she's qualified, or even, what if she's older or just feels like it's too late? What kind of advice would you give to her?
To start writing, I think like you said, we talked about this before. John 10:27 says, "The sheep hear my voice and I know them and they follow me." If you feel that calling, don't be like Carrie and Charlsie. Don't ignore the calling. You might have jumped on it quicker than I did. I was slow. Like I told you from the very beginning, I'm a bit of a stubborn Christian, and I have to hear it a few times, but don't ignore it. There's a verse. Hang on one second. I'm going to pull it. Acts 17:11. This is an odd verse, but it says, "Now the Bereans were more noble-minded than the Thessalonians, for they received the message with great eagerness and examined the scriptures every day to see if the teachings were true." Go to the scripture every day. See what themes keep coming up. If you watch for patterns in sermons, in the scriptures you're reading, in songs, give that heed. There is something that's meant for you. So look at that, examine it, and then apply it. Take a class. It's not always comfortable, but go take a writing class and do the work. It is, you have to show up to do the work. That's the one thing. And you have to do the time in a seat writing. It takes thought and planning and meditation. But if you feel led to do those things, there is a beautiful and kind community and a world that needs those messages. So you may have a unique message that the world needs to hear. And so make a book deal with God, as Carrie said.
I have always heard that 5% of the people who say they're going to write a book ever actually do.
Really?
And the number one reason why people don't write that book is because of they're worried about what people are going to think. It's that
Yeah.
imposter syndrome. And so
Yeah.
I do feel like as a faith-filled, hope-filled writer, author is really, as you said, the end game is it's God's opinion of our writing that matters the most. And I mean, Colossians 3:23 is one of my favorite verses, but as long as we're working for for God and not the eyes of man, then we're on the right track.
Yeah.
It's hard in our flesh not to let the opinions of others to weigh us down. It can, but we have to pray against that. Put on our full armor every day and go to work. And sometimes our pen is our sword. And I love what Ann Voskamp says is our pen is our light to illuminate for others what they may not see.
I love that. Yeah. Someone said something to me, and it's something that's weighed on my heart, and just examining these things too. It was back in the fall, and she is a best-selling romance writer in the Christian, if I won't share the name, but you would probably know it. And we were talking, she was encouraging me because I am in a season of waiting. We talked about I had a book, a traditional publisher picked it up. They offered me a second contract, but sometimes we take, one step forward, two steps back. And so I am in that season of waiting. I have two more books that are completed but they're looking for the right home. And I trust I am fully surrendering to his timing. That's where I am in my walk. I've just learned that I have more strength in the surrender. And so I'm trying to do that. But she was sharing that there was a time for her, and she was very much like me. She was kind of between houses and trying to figure out and praying hard where, looking for discernment, doing all those things. And she realized in that season that she wanted the book deal more than she wanted to glorify God. She thought because she was bearing fruit and writing a Christian book, it was, that it was bearing fruit, but she realized that she was really idolizing that over just the relationship and just what it meant to be in a place of obedience and writing. And I thought that was so powerful. Since then, I've heard something similar about idolizing productivity. And I've just taken that to heart, just truly. And I think it's a daily thing. And that's why you said starting each day with a quiet time where we ground ourselves and remind us that it's not for us, but it's for him.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we have to be every day. And that we don't idolize the process or something about it more than, you know, glorifying glorifying God and furthering the kingdom in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm doing a Bible study with my small group right now called The Way of Wisdom. It's one of the newer studies out by Lifeway. But one of the moms was giving her testimony of how she had really tried to raise her daughters to think of others first, put God first and others second and love others as you love yourself. And she said her daughters had really fought really hard that day. And it's Jeremy Camp's wife. But anyway, and she said she was only 4. They're adults now, but they were 4, and she said she had to get on them and discipline them. And the daughter ends up running away, and she goes to find her in the house, and she's in her bed with the covers over. And she's like, "Honey, are you going to be okay?" And she said, "Mom, I've prayed. I've done everything I know to do, and I just can't stop thinking about myself." And she said, "Isn't that all of us? It's
Yeah.
that battle every day
Yeah.
is our
Every day.
flesh versus what God's will is, and putting Him first and others first, and loving others like ourselves." So you're in good company. You're in good company. But
But I love that. Shining light and being salt and light, being salt and light. I mean,
yeah.
just pray that every day.
Yes, yes. Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. As we wrap it up, I want to remind our listeners to go to your website. She can be found everywhere: social media, Instagram, Facebook. Where else, Charlsie? Where else can we find you?
Social media. Yeah, I think you covered it. And if you sign up for the newsletter, I don't try to fill your inbox, but I do send out some, a monthly notes. And when you sign up, it sends a little compliment that goes with the first book.
Yeah. And recipes. You had a good Easter
Sometimes.
recipe on there.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it's a great email. It really is. And do you have any freebies or any promotions going on right now?
I think my book it's on sale a little bit on Amazon, but the freebie, I give out freebies all the time. So every month I'm running some sort of promotion, whether it's mine or a friend. You can usually find some free books at the bottom of my newsletter. And things that are on sale and some recommendations. But when you sign up for the newsletter, you will get a little freebie. It's kind of a compliment to it's an idea sheet for a girls' night in. So
I like that.
yeah,
Awesome. Well,
yeah.
good. Well, I'm going to get your book. I'm going to read it. I'll give you a good review on Amazon. I want our listeners to do the same. And anything else we can do for you? What can we be praying for you in this season of waiting?
That, I just pray that I find the right place. My prayer for others and for myself is that the right people come into my life and that I can go into people's lives and give them a word of encouragement and in some way impact their spiritual walk in a positive way. And so that's where I am. And I pray that my tagline for writing is Love Stories with Wings, because I really want for the books to not only carry you to a higher place and a better place, your heart, but that it's for him.
Well, that's beautiful. And that is a great prayer to wrap our podcast up with today is just to be salt and light and to impact others for the kingdom. Thank you so much for being here, Charlsie. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah. Y'all have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Listeners, they're not allowed.